magical tools. Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. Yeah, that's good. Okay. So today we're going to be talking about a very tragic and beautiful love story. It's a true story. This is something that actually happened about 40 years ago. And the ruins of this beautiful estate are still sitting in kind of the northwest part of the state of Georgia. Some of you might know this. If you are new to the channel, I am originally from the city of Atlanta, which is the capital of the state of Georgia. So just to give a little bit of context, Somerville is the closest city to where this took place, because of course the CORPSEWOOD Manor is located on a plot of land in the middle of the Chattahoochee National Forest. It is a very secluded area and very beautiful. Somerville, Georgia, to give a little bit of context, is about 1.5 to 2 hours northwest of the city of Atlanta by way of Interstate 75 north and Georgia 140 east. So let's talk a little bit first about the gloves that I'll be wearing today. These gloves are very soft. They are suede leather, and they have these very intricate little cutout diamonds on them. And in some ways it can be a curse to have very small hands. But when it comes to finding good leather vintage gloves, it's actually kind of a blessing. Like the sound that texture makes. Maybe I'll put a trypophobia trigger warning in the title, though. So let's talk about the main protagonist of the story, Dr. Charles Lee Scudder. I took the information about his early life from findagrave.com. He was born in Wauwatosa, which is in Milwaukee County, Wisconsin, And that was on the 6th of October. And that is in the year of 1926. His parents were named Charles Morrison Scudder and Eleanor Edith Lee. So from here, they jump ahead quite a bit to his college years. In the 1940s, Dr. Scudder, well, he wouldn't have been a doctor yet, Charles Scudder attended Oberlin College. He was heavily involved with the drama department and the 1945 production of the play Candida. And at Oberlin College, he met Helen Kilbourne Hazlett, and they were married for a brief time. Their marriage took place on the 10th of September, and that was in the year of 1946. And that was in St. Joseph, Berrien, Michigan, in the United States. So after this marriage had dissolved in the early 1950s, he married a woman by the name of Bortai Bunting, and she was the daughter of a British modernist poet by the name of Basil Bunting and a woman by the name of Marion Culver. Together, they had 4 sons, and their sons were named Saul Scudder, who was still living at the time that article was written, Gideon Scudder, Fenris S. Scudder, and then finally they had a son named Ahab Scudder, who was the youngest and who passed away in 1970. So, next, Charles Scudder moves his academic career to, can I move you just a little bit? Perfect. Don't move an inch. Charles Scudder moves his academic career to Loyola University under the mentorship of Dr. Alexander Karsmar. It's a very complicated name. It is Karzmar. Karsmar. After graduation, he then became the associate director for Loyola University of Chicago Institute for Mind, Drugs, and Behavior. So he worked as an associate professor in this role as well. At this time, he became very renowned for his eccentric behaviors, and all of these were reported later by his mentor, Dr. Karsmar. He would do things like dye his hair purple or red, other crazy colors, He had a pet monkey, and he also bought this mansion on West Adams Street in Chicago. So the mansion at West Adams was somewhat of a precursor to the lifestyle he would end up living while at Corpsewood. There were a couple of theaters nearby, the Balaban and the Katz Chicago Theater. And at some point they were liquidating furniture. And Dr. Scudder, he would have been a doctor at this time, purchased quite a bit of the Baroque furniture that they were liquidating to furnish his mansion. Dr. Scudder was also an accomplished harpist, and this will come up a little bit later as well. And he had even been invited to play with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. He also had some very far out theories about the unity of the universe and had published some of his results on the experiments that he had done on that subject. This is not going to be a terribly deep dive. This is mostly just an overview for Valentine's Day of this very tragic and beautiful love story, but I do invite you to do more research if you are interested. I have put some links down in the description box for your perusal. Another thing that happened during this period is that he hired, in 1959, a man by the name of Joseph Odom to help him care for his sons, who were still children at the time. And at some point, they became romantically involved. You know how it goes. You hire a beautiful nanny, and then you finally get them to take care of your kids for free. I kid, of course. So now we're going to move forward in time about 10 years to the 1970s, 10 or 15 years. All of Dr. Scudder's children are grown, or are out of the house, rather. And he had at some point, of course, divorced Bortai Bunting, who was the mother of his children. And in December of 1975, so the 17th of December in 1975, Dr. Scudder had a very small inheritance, and he used this as the seed money to purchase the southeast quarter of lot 248 in the 6th Land District of Chattooga County, Georgia, for the sum of $10,500 from a man named John S. Cooper, who was from Floyd County. And all of this is part of the public record, so I don't think I need to repeat that. But it is a little complicated, isn't it? On the 6th of October of 1976, so the following year, he and Joseph Odom move to the property that would become Corpsewood. So when the couple arrived that winter, all of the trees were bare. And that is why they gave the property the name of Corpsewood. One of the links that I've included down in the description is an article that Dr. Scudder wrote for a periodical called Mother Earth News. So you get to hear him speak in his own terms and his own words about the property, his reasons for moving there, and how he constructed this off-grid mansion. Some of the causes that he cites for leaving Chicago were that he was old, his wife was gone, his children were grown, and additionally, at some point during his residence in Chicago, the neighborhood had started to decline, and the mansion had fallen into somewhat of disrepair. It can be very expensive to keep up older buildings. Most of the raises that he got from his job ended up just being factored into inflation. And he was becoming disillusioned as a teacher, that the students were rowdy and didn't seem to have a lot of respect for authority or for the material. He does mention his relationship with Joseph, and he also mentions the inheritance that he had received. The two of them together constructed the entire manor with their bare hands. There was no running water, no electricity, and they had dug a well to furnish them with water and used candles for their light. So it was quite a medieval style mansion. Primitive but refined at the same time. So I feel like one of the best sources describing what life was like at the manor is actually in a contemporary documentary, which I have also linked down below, in which this woman is doing an investigative journalism piece on the tragic events that happened and does interview people who had spent time around Corpsewood. Dr. Scudder and Joseph Odom threw a lot of parties. There was one outbuilding in particular, which was a bit like a chicken coop, but the upstairs had been furnished in a very lavish way, and this was referred to as the Pink Room. And this was the site of many nights of gallivanting involving substances of various legal schedules, shall we say, and intimate encounters between people. It seemed from the research that I had done that the people who ended up in the pink room at the manor were of legal age and consent, and consenting, but I didn't really find a lot of information specifically about that. You have to consider this was the South. It is still today a very conservative area. And while they were not evil, terrible people, there is proof that Dr. Scudder did subscribe to Satanist newsletters. There were stained glass windows at the house depicting the head of Baphomet and other such regalia. And so I think it can be safely inferred that they did have Satanist leanings. Now, of course, I wasn't there, so this is all alleged and according to the research that I was able to do. And there is a Church of Satan article linked below about Dr. Scudder. In addition to these fantastical parties, they would allow local hunters to use their land. This is how they made the acquaintance of a young man by the name of Avery Brock. And when he got to the manor and he saw how these two people were living and their life of assumed luxury, he thought that certainly they must have piles and piles of cash and riches stashed somewhere on the property. Now, I do want to point out that they were not particularly wealthy in terms of physical goods, but we'll get to that momentarily. But I can see why, if somebody saw this lifestyle, they might think that these people had a lot of money. So, to kind of set the context for you, Summerville, Georgia is a very rural part of the state. Pretty much anything outside of Atlanta in the state of Georgia is, by the standards of most large cities, not very densely populated. In addition to this, employment opportunities can often be somewhat limited in these areas, especially to people who are not landowners. And so what had happened recently to Avery Brock at this time is that this man by the name of Tony West, who was perhaps 10 or so years older, had ended up moving in with Avery. I think they were living in a trailer at the time, which is not uncommon for that area. And the two of them together, while brainstorming ideas for making money, had decided that it might be a good idea to rob Corpsewood Manor. So let's talk about the very tragic occurrences on the night of on this particular night, and also in the contemporary documentary that I mentioned previously, there is an interview with Teresa Hudgens, who was there that night. And I think that she does, for her having been there and not been involved, I think she did a wonderful job of explaining how things went down. And she has since then written and released a book, so you can read that as well if you like. And she was kind of dating this guy named Joey Wells, who happened to be Tony West's nephew. And there's really not much to do in this area. So Joey says, "Hey Teresa, let's go hang out, drive around with my uncle and his friend Avery." And she, I think, didn't really know going into it what they were going to be doing at all. Oh, maybe we'll go watch a movie. Maybe we'll just go hang out and watch TV. Just another casual night. And they do decide to go over to Corpsewood. And the selling point that Brock and West gave to Joey and Teresa was that Dr. Scudder and Joseph Odom did actually produce many different varieties of homemade wine. And of course, all of the variously scheduled substances that I had mentioned previously. It was basically a place where you knew that you could show up and have a good time. So they get over to the manor and they go up into the pink room and everybody's drinking this homemade wine. If you watch the documentary, you'll see that Teresa talks about Brock and West saying that they started hallucinating after consuming some quantity of this wine. And so I do invite you to watch her words on it, because I think that she does a much better job of describing. But basically, after they start hallucinating, allegedly, Brock goes out to the car and he gets his .22 caliber hunting rifle. And unfortunately, then uses it not only on Joseph Odom, but also on the couple's two beloved mastiffs. At this point, Brock and West tie up Dr. Scudder and they demand money. There is a great more detail of the night, but one very interesting feature is that not too long before this, Dr. Scudder had actually painted a portrait of himself in which he had become deceased due to bullet wounds in the head, and that it was seen as a premonition of his own murder. So I will put that artwork here just briefly. So, Joey Wells and Teresa Hudgens really were not involved in this at all, and they were so horrified by what was going on that they got into the car and tried to leave, but unfortunately the car at this point would not start. Brock and West then did search the entire house, and the only thing that they found that was of substantial value was Dr. Scudder's harp. And as this was the only thing of value in the house, they ended Dr. Scudder's life also. The car, of course, not starting, everybody then piles into, or at least Brock and West, get into Dr. Scudder's black Jeep. The harp did not fit in the vehicle, and so they left it behind. So, as far as robberies go, this one was quite botched. And of course, it's always good to bring along some casual witnesses when you commit murder and robbery, so keep that in mind for your own escapades, right? So, they drove the Jeep all the way to Vicksburg, Mississippi, and found the vehicle of a Navy Lieutenant Kirby Phelps. And in order to take his vehicle, they also ended his life. So this has turned into quite an experience for the two of them. So it was 4 days later, on December 16th, that a neighbor noticed bullet holes in the front door of Corpsewood Manor and called the police. So remember, this was a very secluded manor, but it was also a party spot, and hunters would come by regularly to use the lands. So it wasn't too long before the crime was discovered. Joey Wells and Teresa Hudgens were both incredibly cooperative to the police and ended up testifying against Avery Brock and Tony West. Over the week following December 16th and leading up to Christmas, both of them did surrender to the police. And after the trial, both of them ended up getting life sentences. So at least the killers were brought to justice. But it was a very tragic occurrence. And it seemed as though, however, they were not particularly targeted because of sexual orientation or possible religious affiliation any more than they would have been targeted otherwise. That is purely my own speculation, however, and it doesn't make the crime any less tragic. So thank you for joining me for this tragic and beautiful gothic horror story. I hope that you have enjoyed it. I hope you have a very happy Valentine's pretty random as to how I do videos in relation to